Did you know that 45% of people say the lack of trust in leadership is the biggest issue impacting their work performance? Let that sink in for a minute. And then here's another one for you. Gallup research reveals that 96% of engaged employees trust management, compared with 46% of disengaged employees. And it also shows that highly trusted workplaces enjoy 50% higher employee productivity, 106% more energy at work, and 13% fewer sick days. It comes down to this. Companies with high trust levels outperform companies with low trust levels by, wait for it, 186%. So if you are a leader that's having a performance issue with your team, it's time to step into the sandbox today and have a conversation all around when leaders don't trust and how that impacts employee performance. Welcome to Playing in the Sandbox, the podcast where we are deeply committed to inspiring action in today's leaders. And I am your host, Tammy J. Bond, excited to share in the conversation with you today as we look at employee trust levels that are rooted in when leaders don't trust. It's got to start somewhere, y'all. And it's time we step into the sandbox and reflect in the mirror for a minute about where the trust issues actually start. So kick off your shoes. Let's step in, dig our toes into the sandbox, and get ready for some great content about what I love to talk about when leaders don't trust. Grab a pen and paper. You're going to want to take some notes. You're going to also want to grab your copy of today's action plan to go with this episode. You can head over to tammyjbond.com/podcast and click on the episode When Leaders Don't Trust to get the action plan for today. Because there's going to be some great content on there that's probably not going to always all make it into the podcast episode today. So head on over to tammyjbond.com/podcast. Let's get going with today's topic, when leaders don't trust. You know, we heard about the statistics of what happens when employees trust. And I like to tie it back to when leaders don't trust their employees, what's that ripple effect? And we heard it in those statistics. We heard it in the culture, right? This is all about building a healthy, strong culture of an organization. When your employees trust you, that means you're modeling trust as a leader for them. I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit because I want you to get in your mind, leader, as you're navigating performance levels in your organization. When you have people that are not performing, are you communicating effectively? How are you at trusting them to do the job and giving them the resources and releasing the resources to get in the tools in their hands so they can do the job you actually hired them to do? You know, I have an opportunity every week to talk with employees who are frustrated and have lack of trust in leadership. But then when I talk to the same level of leadership or the same company's leadership, they don't actually trust their employees. So we have a trust issue going both ways. And leader, it starts with you. When the leader at the top of the organization is actually modeling the behaviors that they expect from others to perform, or levels of expectation for performance, when those are being modeled at the top of the organization and all the way through, from tier to tier to tier, your boots on the ground frontline staff are going to model what they hear from the top. It is a trickle down effect, and it has an unbelievable positive or negative impact depending on how you as leader model trust for your people. So what happens when leaders don't trust? Let's talk about what causes lack of trust. Lack of trust is well, can I do it better myself? Lack of trust is often rooted in, well, they failed before, so I'm not really sure. They're not performing at the level that I need them to, so I'm going to micromanage them and hover over them to ensure that they get it done at my level of expectation, which, by the way, more often than not, has never clearly been expressed or set what that level of expectation and performance looks like. When leaders don't trust their people, the ripple effect that it has goes so far and wide across your teams and your organization. And it impacts the culture. Can create a toxic culture. It also can create an environment where when we don't trust each other, we're not going to take risks. We're not going to offer new ideas. We're not going to be creative with the resources that we have to expand for more opportunities in the future. Because why? Because there's fear of retaliation, because there's fear of the what happens if, because there's fear of if I outshine my leader that I report to, what are they going to do to me? So that goes back to the retaliation, but it's also that fear of how I look to my peers. And with the amazing amount of opportunity right now, and really honestly, every single day in the workplace, as we are recasting a new vision for what normal in the workplace looks like because of remote working from home, a hybrid model of home and office. And some places are saying, nope, I want everybody back in. And I tend to lean on the side of I want everybody back in the office, not because I'm hovering. I actually want to set a better culture. And I know I'm going to have a better opportunity of doing that when they're in the office working with me. It takes a very focused, concentrated effort from you as a leader to nurture relationships remotely, much more so than it does. The challenge is much greater, I'll say it that way, remotely than it is for those that are working within the office. When we don't trust that people are getting their jobs done remotely, it impacts their performance at a greater level. Why? Because your mood, your attitude, your expressions to those remote workers is often different than those working in the office. And what we're seeing now, interestingly, as much as our employees are saying, I want you to trust that I can do the work and I'm going to work from home and I'd like to have a hybrid model, please. They're the ones that are those working, 50% home, 50% in the office, or 60-40 model. They're the ones that are more often than not actually complaining that, well, my leader doesn't trust me or they don't have as good of a relationship with me because I'm not in the office all the time. No kidding, because you're not there for the spontaneity of what happens in the office. Now, we've been doing work like remote working for decades now. And so remote working isn't and leadership isn't new. But for some reason, the shift with the pandemic has impacted, I've noticed, our trust levels of our employees because we now seem to have lost this level of control, I hear from leaders, and they're not sure how to get it back. Well, let's look at history, how thriving teams that are remote or global teams, how are they thriving and outperforming people even with this remote work um, schedule, right? The reason is because the leader trusts their employees to do the job and they're equipping them with the tools to do the job that they were hired to do. And the expectations were set very clear of what work looks like and what success looks like and what the outcomes look like. And they're constantly talking about that. And yet somehow we think, okay, well, now because we went through this pandemic, we've still got half of our workforce working from home because they don't want to come into the office anymore, or they don't want to be there 5 days a week. And so they're going to work from home and their productivity seems to have gone down. Some places have seen an increase in productivity with the work from home model, certainly in the efficacy of the people seeing that they can succeed. But we're not communicating about what potential landmines are in the way with the work from home model. And we're not communicating clearly the expectations and the outcomes for the performance. And when we're not doing that, that causes people to question, can I trust that they're doing the job? When ultimately, leader, it's you that people aren't trusting to communicate effectively to know what success looks like in their job. Oh my gosh, I've got to unpack this. This is this is a big topic that I'm sure some of you are probably going, wait, do I trust my people? Are they performing for me the way I want them to? Are we seeing the results that I want to see? Well, let's talk about what happens when leaders don't trust their people. It creates a just get by, or worse, a status quo performance mindset within the organization. When you as the leader aren't trusting your people, they're just get by, just get through, don't cause any questions, don't cause any ripple effects, and they're status quo. They're not excelling, they're not bringing you new ideas, they're not getting creative, which does what to you as the leader? Frustrates you, causes you to question, do I have the right seat in the seat? And that's all because you're not trusting them to do their job and equipping them with tools. It has a ripple effect that goes far and wide when leaders don't trust their people. Employees spend more time talking about self-preservation and even job hunting while you're paying them than they are performing at their job because, well, they're not sure how to perform at their job. Do you know, side note, we just had a fun little conversation with one of our kids' schools about our son's performance in school and some attitude that this, teenager has with teachers. And it was an opportunity for us to learn how they see him and an opportunity for them to see how we see what's happening as well. And what's funny is one of the pieces of feedback that they gave was, well, he's just not sure how he can succeed. And so he's very frustrated. He doesn't know how to succeed. And I'm like, well, that's a both and on both of our parts, you as the leaders in the school and us as the leaders as parents. We've got to paint the better picture for him to know what performance in his role as a student looks like. And if we are not aligned on the same page as the two leaders in his life, then guess what? He's not going to succeed. Hey, leader, that goes no matter if you're dealing with a teenager in school or you in the workplace leading your people who can sometimes act like teenagers, let's be real, in the workplace. You've got to set the clarity of what their success and outcome looks like when they've achieved the goal. When they know that, that's going to actually build their trust in you that you can communicate effectively. But if you don't trust them to do it, guess what? You're not going to communicate the outcome, and then you've created this spinning effect. Did you know that talent acquisition costs and employee turnover costs increase when leaders don't trust their people? It does. It estimates between 150 and 200% of an employee's salary is the cost of turnover. So when you have high rate of turnover in your employees, it's time to take a step back. It's time to do in those exit interviews, asking the questions of their trust level. What more did they need to do their job successfully? What more did they need to feel that they could achieve the performance outcomes of their position? And I guarantee, because I've seen it time and time again, I have actually conducted employee exit interviews just to confirm my theory that when the employee doesn't trust the leader, it has the greatest impact on their turnover and how quickly they're going to move on to another opportunity. And with the great resignation and now the quiet quitting that is happening, leader, you have an obligation to your people for the performance of your company, of the performance of your organization, to check in with those employees and see where their level of satisfaction, but more importantly, their level of trust and their level of understanding and knowing what top performance looks like, and that they understand how they can achieve it. That's your responsibility, leader. See, lack of trust in leadership is a red flag that your organization may have a toxic culture. And it happens in businesses of all sizes, y'all, from small to medium to large to gigantic. Toxic culture is a thing, and trust in leadership is one of the drivers. A lack of trust reduces transparency and communication. We're not trusting. Think about your own personal relationships, friend. When you're not trusting in a personal relationship, you're going to be open with them and communicate freely? Heck no, you're going to keep it close to the vest and you're going to protect. And that's really what's happening when we don't trust. We're covering and protecting. It's just like that just get by status quo employee. I'm actually protecting myself to save my job because I really don't want to go find another job right now. Or I'm not sure what another job would look like. Or I'm going to be looking for another job, but keeping it status quo to keep the one I have until I have something else lined up. It's dishonest. That dishonesty is a root level of something that's happening within the culture within your organization. And it happens in teams of all sizes. So lack of trust in you as the leader leads to low innovation, a lack of agility and flexibility and responsiveness to changing conditions, right? How many of you have heard, by a show of hands, right? How many of you have heard from employees that they get stressed out by the change? They're not sure how to navigate the change. They don't like all of the change. Well, that just means they're unsure and uncertain of how they can perform within the change because what? We have a lack of trust, which means lack of communication. We haven't communicated it. So when employees have a lack of trust in leadership, they often avoid communicating with you or with the team out of fear of retaliation, out of fear of, am I wrong? Am I right? What is it going to say about me? What are people going to say about me? What's the water cooler conversation going to be? It doesn't really matter. Why bother? I mean, the list goes on of why they're not bringing things forward. And your boots on the ground employees, especially if you have a central headquarters and you have remote locations, your boots on the ground employees need a high touch, high level of communication from your office, from that central headquarters location, to let them know you want to hear from them, you want to see them, that you do see them, and you want to know what they're experiencing and what more you can do to be of service to them. Oh my goodness. If you just implemented that and started having from your office at the headquarters, you started having weekly check-ins with your remote office leaders, and they're having weekly check-ins with their staff, we're going to increase our trust level. We're going to increase the knowing how to succeed and what success looks like because we're going to communicate effectively. And friend, if you need any tools on how to communicate, you need to connect with me over at tammyjbond.com. I will set you up with toolbox on how to effectively communicate with your employees in your office, with your employees external to your office, those remote workers, all of that. I am passionate about seeing that we communicate more effectively with our people so that we can all succeed, because you're in the game to win. You might have employees that are sitting on the sideline right now and they're just waiting for whatever is stirring to pass because they don't know that they can trust to step out. They're afraid to step into the lane of traffic. And so they're just sitting on the sideline and they're waiting for you to open it up so that they can step in and fully engage because you're communicating with them and they're not afraid of you, or they're not afraid of retaliation, and they can trust that you have their best interest in mind. Do you know, one of the things that I love to say, and actually heard it many years ago from a very dear friend of mine, Lou Tice, and he's gone on to heaven now, and we miss him. We miss him every day, but are so grateful for the impact that he had on so many lives. And if you've actually been impacted by the life of Lou Tice and the education from the Pacific Institute that he birthed, right, and that he modeled so well, send me a comment, hit me up on social and let me know. I'd love to put a comment on this podcast and let me know. Yes, I was impacted by Lou Tice. This is something that an affirmation that he shared with me and he shared with the people in his network. I hold people in the highest possible regard. And so it gives you that picture of how you hold people. And so if trust is an issue for you, if trust is a challenge for you to trust your people to do the job that you've hired them to do, friend, here's what I encourage you to do. Because the trust issue will break you down at some point. But when we shift our picture of how we see and what we're focusing on versus focusing on the failure, we're focusing on, I hold people in the highest possible regard. Right? That means I'm level setting at an expectation of highest possible regard. I think the best in them. I see the best in them. I expect the best in them. And I'm going to champion for the best in them to come out. If you have trust issues, deal with that on your time. Hire yourself someone to walk that through with you so that you can unpack why you have a trust issue and what you need to feel confident as the leader that you can trust your people, so that they in return will trust you, because leader, when you don't trust your people, the impact is far greater than you might be realizing. You might just be thinking it's a level of frustration and you're not really sure how to change it. Or you might be thinking, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I've heard leaders say when they don't trust. And it's a very deep issue. But when we turn that around and we reframe it, I hold people in the highest possible regard. I equip them with the tools every day to do their job and succeed. I have my weekly check-ins with them to see what more they need from me to succeed at their job. That's your role. You hire the people to do the job, but you equip them. You equip them with all of the tools to succeed at it. You see, to achieve maximum employee performance, employees need to promptly and transparently be able to communicate with you. And that's going to mean that they're going to have a level of trust with you. So if they see potential problems or have concerns, they can come to you or come to leadership and say, here's my concern. And they trust that it's going to be addressed. Now, addressed and fixing, or addressed and resolving, can actually be two very different things. Let's break that down. Addressing it says, I see you, I hear you. Thank you for bringing your concern forward to me. Tell me what resolution looks like to you. Thank you for sharing what resolution looks like to you, employee A. I'm super appreciative of that. And here's what I know. I know that I'm going to take this information and I'm going to do some investigating, and I'm going to follow up with you at minimum within 1 week. No more than 1 week's time. Or if it's urgent, I'm going to follow up with you in 48 hours. I'm going to do a little digging on this. And are you open that the resolution may not be exactly as you've asked for it to be? And they're going to say, I guarantee your employee is going to say, yes. Okay. Because why? Because you're telling them, I heard you, I see you, I'm going to do something about it. I don't know that the resolution is going to be exactly as you want it, but I'm going to come back with something and we're going to co-create what moving forward looks like. And I'm going to tell my employee that every single time. I am going to applaud them and thank them for coming forward. It doesn't mean you always get what you want. It doesn't mean when you write your Christmas list to Santa Claus that you get every single thing on that list. Come on, parents. How many of you can give me a shout out on that one? Because, you've got the kids that create the exceptional Christmas list, right? And then you get to break it down. It's not always about that. It's about the dream. It's about the hope. It's about the wish that then for you as the leader, if they've been bold enough to bring it to you, your opportunity and your trust building opportunities to let them know what you're going to do with that. Because when you as a leader don't trust your people, that creates fear. It creates toxicity in your culture, in your organization, and it creates constricted views of what's possible for the future in your company, in your people, and it creates high rates of turnover that's costing you a ridiculous amount of money and time. Okay. It's addressing, or it's impacting your bottom line profits. I guarantee it. So let's talk about some of the reasons that your employees don't trust you. Ineffective or irregular communication. That would be one of them. Leadership selection is not effective in their eyes. Okay. I've seen many companies where there is nepotism. I've seen many organizations where there are, the favorites, or the person who builds the widget really well gets the promotion, but they never learned how to do the people really well. You've heard me talk about that before. And you've got other people on the sideline that are doing the classes and going to school, or getting hired the coach to make them a more effective individual in the workplace. And they're being passed over for all sorts of reasons. But then what? We never actually talk about why they're passed over. And that's a future episode. But when our leadership selection is not effective, it impacts your employees. So it's something you're going to want to dive into. Employees feel that they're being treated unfairly, or that you're withholding critical information to support the success in their job. Again, a communication issue. So how do we treat employees fairly? Wow, I could do a whole conversation just on that. I didn't say equally, I said fairly, right? There is a fairness that people expect in the workplace. And so how we communicate that and how we model that is critical for building that employee's trust in you. One of the I would say probably actually the biggest thing is failure to take ownership of your own mistakes. Our employees don't trust us when we don't take ownership of our mistakes. When we pass the buck, when we push the blame, when we say that somebody else did something or didn't do, and we make it all about somebody else, that actually causes a huge problem in the ability for your employees to trust you. So I want you to think about that. Are you someone who sweeps it under the rug or pushes the blame, passes the buck? Then guess what? You have a trust issue both ways. So here's another one from Gallup research. Employees who trust their employers experience 74% less stress and 40% less burnout. And 1/3 of employees indicated that they would stay longer with an employer if its leaders kept their promises. And 28% said they would extend their tenure if transparency was practiced, wait for it, at all levels. Think about that for a minute. Transparency at all levels. Do you have that in your organization? Is that something that you want? How are you going to get it? What's that even look like? Time to have a conversation. Because you might be thinking you're transparent, but the people below you are keeping things so close to the vest that they're not. They're not being transparent. And it's getting in the way. It's getting in the way to be able to successfully lead in your organization. So let's talk about the 6 ways to foster trust, because that's what it is, right? If you're not trusting your people, then they're not trusting you. So how do we foster it? This is the one. Translate and model your corporate values into behaviors. Model and train those behaviors to all employees. Model them, own them, train them so that the employees know what the behavior. If I'm doing this behavior, this is actually honoring this value. And you have it more than just on a pretty poster board on the wall or framed artwork or painted. I've seen values and mission statements in beautiful artwork all throughout offices as I've traveled into all different sizes and types of clients. And I giggle every time I see them, because all I need to do is sit down in a room with the board of directors or with the executive team, the leadership team, and say, so tell me what your mission statement is. Tell me what your vision statement is, and tell me what your values are and what are the behaviors and what do those look like. And 99% of the time, they cannot nail every single one of those. And they don't. And I would say 75% of the time, they really actually don't even know what the values and the behaviors look like, and probably even greater than 75. I should start keeping track. It's ridiculous. Why do we invest the time to do these plans with the vision and the values and the mission statement and then put it on pretty artwork, or have the little cards sitting on people's desks to say, this is who we are and this is what we value, or, on the employee awards at the end of the year? We're not attaching them to behaviors so they know when they're doing it, this is what they're doing and why, and what it actually means for the company. So translate that for them. That's how we start to foster that trust. Ensure that the leaders in your organization, in your team, in your company behave consistently with all the core values, all of them, and you too. Right? Ensure that the leaders communicate in ways that support not just the core values, but the behaviors and the beliefs of the company, that supports the employee succeeding in their role, because we're equipping them with the tools. And it all ties to why we're here, why we do what we do, and how we're going to get it done. And ensure that employees feel that they are involved in decisions. Do you know one of the things that I would say I probably least like when I'm out with organizations? There's so many. I probably say that a lot. Hey, friend. But I really do. I just don't like it when we send out employee surveys to see how we're doing as an organization, how are we doing as a company, how are we doing as leaders. We send that out, and then we don't tell the employees anything of the results. We don't tell them what we're doing with them. We don't tell them what we learned from them. We don't tell them, thank you. We appreciate the time. And so then we get mad and we get hyper focused on, wow, only 35% of our employees completed the survey. No kidding. Why would they take time out of the job you've hired them to do to complete a survey that means nothing to them, because you haven't communicated the last 3 that you asked them to do, what the results were, or made any of the changes when you asked them for suggestions? So get them involved by telling them what you're going to do with the information. And when you have decisions to make, it doesn't mean you take their ideas, but you get them involved so they feel that they have a voice. And that helps build trust and efficacy in you as the leader and in them as an employee to succeed in your company. And lastly, measure employee perceptions of other leaders, of their leaders' integrity. Measure their perception of their leaders' integrity. Do they perceive them to be integral, to be honoring and valuing their word and their commitments, to be setting me up for success versus putting roadblocks or landmines in my path, right? That's really important to getting trust from your employees. Yes, it's holding them in high regard and giving it to them and equipping them to do the jobs, but then also asking them for that feedback, because that feedback could be paramount to the decisions that you make about future promotions and about future projects and about all things related to performance in your organization. That's where you start to break down a toxic culture and build up a healthy culture. So there's something important to note here. This can't be a matter of, well, we've got HR and they're going to handle it, right? So if we're going to build trust and we're going to have communication happen about what we're doing with the information we're gathering, or we want to let people know what their job performance is, golly, that's really that's an onboarding and that's an annual review function. And that really lands in HR. No, wrong answer. HR can help you set up the processes and the systems. Yes. However, if you squarely have this, even if it's perceived, if trust building is perceived as an HR driven function, I promise you that the process itself will tend to atrophy over time. It's not going to work. Building trust is squarely an executive and line management opportunity that requires setting up accountability systems, having executive oversight, having reviews, and other methods to drive home the importance of trust building in your organization. It's you, leader, where building trust starts with you. When you don't trust, there's a ripple effect and they don't trust you back. And then we come to an impasse, right? We're on the edge of a cliff, right? Who's going to step off first? Well, probably the employee, because they're going to step off the cliff and take a job somewhere else where they feel like they can actually succeed, because their hope and their belief in what they learned in the interview process is that this is a company I'm going to that's actually going to communicate with me how to succeed and what success looks like. Your people are watching you. As a leader, your people are watching you. They're watching every move you make, and they're waiting for you to step up and lead. They're pleading for you to step up and lead, to trust them to do the job that you hired them to do, equip them with training so they can excel. That's it. Trust them, equip them so they can excel. Step up and lead. It starts with you. Thanks for joining me in the sandbox today. My hope is that you are leaving with some new tips and tools and strategies to navigate your personal leadership, your team leadership, and your next bold conversation. You know, it would mean so much to me if you went in and left a review on this podcast. And I'd love to hear a comment on the podcast as well. I love to hear the positive and even the negative. And if there's something more that you want from me, I want you to tell me that as well, because I do look at the comments and I do pay attention to what people are saying, and I want to hear more. And I love it when people reach out to me through social networks or even in email or through the website at tammyjbond.com to leave me feedback about what more you want in your own personal leadership journey. And as you're navigating this, building trust in others, as you learn to navigate what you can do to trust others, I want you to use the resource over at tammyjbond.com/podcast. Click on this episode to download the action plan for today so you can get more tools and strategies on navigating trust in the workplace. Because when people don't trust you as the leader, they're looking for another opportunity somewhere else. And do you want to be known as a great tool for developing and training people up to go to the competitor, or do you want to develop and train people up to stay and excel with you? Think about that. Thanks for joining me today in the sandbox. Make it a great day.